In 1934, East Portland workers uncovered artifacts worth an estimated $47,000 in today's money, but the discovery was buried, literally and figuratively. You've likely walked over similar hidden histories in your own city without knowing it. That's exactly what happened when foreman Gerald Wick's crew hit something 12 feet down near Southeast Division Street. What they found would vanish from records entirely. Why? So dense it took 2 shovels to break through. He files a report. He schedules a follow-up survey for the following spring. That survey never happens. And what was found 12 feet below East Portland has never been fully explained. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what East Portland is supposed to be. Officially, it's a late 19th century addition to the city grid, farmland platted and annexed, nothing remarkable beneath it. The archaeology of the Portland Basin, as it appears in standard histories, begins with Chinookan peoples along the Columbia and Willamette rivers, traces back perhaps 2,000 years with confidence, and stops there. Neat. Orderly. Settled. But the records I've kept tell a different story, one assembled from a Multnomah County foreman's report, a geology survey filed by Portland State University in 1971, and fragments of Chinook oral tradition that most academic histories footnote and move past. Put them together, and East Portland's hidden past stops being a footnote and becomes a question no one has cleanly answered. Here's what Wick's 1934 report actually described. The ash stratum sat at approximately 12 feet of depth, well below any documented settlement layer for the region. Within and immediately above it, work basalt pieces showing deliberate flaking consistent with tool manufacture, not natural fracture. Charred organic material arranged in what Wick called deliberate rows, though he was a foreman, not an archaeologist, and the language is his own. And one additional object, described in the report only as a carved piece, basalt, approximate 6 inches, geometric markings. It was photographed, assigned a catalog number by Multnomah County, and listed as transferred to a receiving institution. No receiving institution is named. The object has not surfaced in any Oregon museum catalog, university collection, or private archive that researchers have been able to confirm. That's the first gap. But it's not the strangest one. Now, here's where the official story starts to come apart. The 1971 Portland State University Geology Report, authored by a Dr. Francis Hollis, submitted as part of a broader Portland Basin sediment study, contains a single paragraph that received almost no attention at the time and has been cited in fewer than a handful of subsequent papers. Hollis was mapping volcanic ash deposits across the basin, correlating them with known cascade eruption events. Mount Mazama. Mount St. Helens. The usual sequence. But beneath southeast Portland, specifically in core samples pulled from the East Portland corridor, Hollis found an ash layer that didn't match any eruption in the established record. The isotopic signature was distinct. The depth placed it between 4,000 and 6,000 years before the present, depending on the sediment compression model used. And it was localized. Not the broad basin-wide deposit you'd expect from a major cascade event, but a concentrated stratum, dense, sitting in a pattern Hollis described as consistent with repeated, proximate burning. She noted it. She flagged it for follow-up. The follow-up was never funded. Few remember this, but Hollis submitted a secondary grant application to the Oregon Historical Society the following year specifically to return to the East Portland sediment cores. The application was denied. The reason given, insufficient regional significance. A buried ash stratum that doesn't match any known eruption, sitting beneath a neighborhood with an officially empty pre-settlement history, was judged insufficient. Now I want to give you 3 records from the next portion of this story, and the third one changes what the first 2 mean entirely. The first is a transcription of Chinook oral tradition collected by ethnographer Albert Gatchett in the 1870s and 1880s. Gatchett was meticulous, and his records are held at the Smithsonian. Within his collected accounts from Clackamas Chinook speakers, there are references to a place on the east side of the Great River confluence, a place described as where the ground remembers fire. The phrasing is poetic, but Gatchett noted that multiple independent speakers used near-identical language. It wasn't metaphor being passed along. It was description. The second record is a 1912 survey map filed by the Oregon Land Office, part of a routine agricultural assessment of the East Portland Flats before full annexation. The surveyor noted in his margin comments, not in the official body of the survey, in the margin, that local farmers working the land near present-day Southeast 82nd Avenue had repeatedly turned up black earth and stone chips at plow depth. The surveyor did not investigate. He wasn't paid to. But he wrote it down. Black earth. Stone chips. At plow depth in 1912. 2 decades before Wick's crew went 12 feet deeper and found something they weren't expecting. Now the third record. And this one sat unremarked in a Portland City Archives folder mislabeled as a Water Department maintenance log until a local historian named Carol Machon found it in 2009 and published a short piece in the Oregon Historical Quarterly that received almost no wider attention. The folder contained a 1935 internal memo, the year the follow-up survey was cancelled. The memo, addressed from the Multnomah County Engineer's Office to the Portland Bureau of Water Works, authorized the rapid completion of the saw corridor and the backfilling of the excavation trench. Standard language, mostly. But at the bottom, a handwritten addition, per conversation with name redacted, artifacts to be secured. Site to be closed without further assessment. The name is redacted. Not blurred by age. Redacted, a clean line drawn through it before the document was filed. Someone made a decision in 1935 to close that site and secure those artifacts. Someone whose name was removed from the record before it was archived. What does it mean? Here's where I want to be careful, because the honest answer is, we don't fully know. The evidence doesn't point to a single clean explanation. It points to a cluster of questions that haven't been answered because, largely, they haven't been asked, not systematically, not with the resources the site seems to warrant. What we can say is this. The ash stratum hollis found in 1971 is real. It's in a published geological report. Its isotopic signature doesn't match the Cascade eruption record. That's a fact, not interpretation. The Gatchett transcriptions describing where the ground remembers fire on the east bank of the confluence are real. They predate Wick's discovery by 50 years. They predate Hollis's geology by nearly a century. The 1912 margin notation about black earth and stone chips is real. The 1934 foreman's report is real. The carved basalt object assigned a catalog number and listed as transferred to an unnamed institution is real, and it's missing. And the 1935 memo with the redacted name is real. Carol Machon held it. It's in the Oregon Historical Quarterly, Volume 110, if you want to look. What I found in the archives doesn't prove a continuous human presence in East Portland going back for to 6,000 years. But it raises a question the official history of the Portland Basin hasn't answered. What is beneath Southeast Division Street and why has every attempt to look more closely been quietly set aside? The Chinook phrase that Gatchett recorded, where the ground remembers fire, is a striking piece of language for a people describing a place. Ground doesn't remember anything, of course. But ash does. Ash holds its isotopic signature for thousands of years. Ash tells you what burned, and when, and roughly where. 12 feet below East Portland, there's a layer of ash that doesn't fit. Worked stone that shouldn't be there. A carved object that was catalogued and vanished. A name that was removed from a document before it was filed. East Portland's hidden past is still down there. And so far, no one with the resources to look has chosen to look. If you followed this record to its end, one question is worth sitting with: which part of this was incompetence, and which part was a decision? Leave your answer below. The archive is still open.